I'm wearing pants. This is the first time in 5 months that I actually got to wear pants. But anyway, this is the GoPro Hero 7 follow-up, and I just want to let you guys know, after my initial review, you sent in a ton of comments and a few things that needed to be addressed. So let's start with what I got wrong first, because I get things wrong. So anyway, the first thing, and one of the things I thought was the most annoying, was the shutter button actually working when the camera's off. Well, it turns out a lot of you guys said that if you're wearing a helmet, you got to be able to turn the camera on, and you don't really need to see anything, so that's how you get it activated. That totally makes sense. So I don't know why I didn't think of that. The second thing was in the menu system. So here's where I was having issues. Click on the menu and then click here for linear and then go to super wide, and what I was doing was clicking in the middle of the screen and it wouldn't stick. So go back to super wide, select it, make sure it turns blue, and then it changes. So that's just my cavemanness coming out there. Alright, let's talk about the bugs really quick, because there's a few of them. The first bug was a major one, and that almost made me send my camera back, and that was the fact that I couldn't get the camera to properly connect to the app on my phone. Now, I could do it on a tablet, no problem, but it wouldn't connect correctly on my phone, and I couldn't figure out why. Now, I use an LG V30. I use Wi-Fi calling on that phone, and that was the problem. So basically, disconnect Wi-Fi calling, and that fixes Wi-Fi. Now, the GoPro connects to your camera two different ways. One is Bluetooth, and that allows the camera to turn on and off. And the second one is Wi-Fi, and that allows you to transfer data from the camera to your phone or tablet or whatever. Now, the thing is, when you have Wi-Fi calling enabled, it causes it to loop in Wi-Fi mode. So the camera can see it, or the app can see the camera, but it can't actually stay connected to it. It keeps disconnecting and reconnecting and whatever. So it's just a huge mess. But anyway, after I disabled Wi-Fi calling, everything worked seamlessly and perfectly in the way that it should. The second bug I found was super annoying, and that was the 13% battery issue. And it didn't matter if it was a GoPro battery or an aftermarket battery. I'm using both, and I tested this all week long just to make sure that it was an actual issue. And once the battery gets down to about 13%, if you're recording, what happens is it will record half of a video file and stop, but the recording keeps going. So you'll have a full audio clip the length of your video, but only half of your video. So that's definitely a bug. The next problem that I had was WAV files. So in the Hero 7, and I think this has it in the Hero 6 and the Hero 5, is that they have the ability to turn on Pro Audio or Raw Audio, depending upon what it's called, which is also another bug. In the app, it's called, I think, Pro Audio, and on the camera itself, it's called Raw Audio. But anyway, when this is enabled, what it does is it creates a WAV file next to your MP4 file, and that's supposed to allow you to bring this WAV file into your software and screw with it and adjust it and fix it and whatever it is that you need to do to it. The only problem is I haven't found a single program yet, and I've tried everything that I could think of, that will actually read these WAV files. The data's there, there's a file size to it, but nothing registers when you bring them in. So yeah, that's kind of a problem, and apparently that's been around since the Hero 5. So if anybody has a fix for that, definitely let me know, because I'd love to hear about it. No raw photo. Now, I discovered this just screwing around with the photo mode because I wanted to see what it was like, and if you turn on shooting in RAW and HDR, you get the HDR file, but you don't get a RAW. It won't record both. It's pretty much just a JPEG. So in order to get it to record a GRV, you have to turn HDR off. So that's a bug, because you think you're getting a RAW file, but you're not. That's pretty much it for the bugs. Now there's just a few minor things that drive me crazy. One is the power button. Cycling through the power button, you can change between photo, video, and time lapse. Now the only problem is you can also do that by swiping the back of the screen just as easy. And you need to see the back of the screen anyway to set it up. So why is it on the power button? I have no idea. So while I'm on the subject, here's the difference between time lapse and time warp. Now in my other video, a lot of you guys said that the GoPro color looks a little too contrasty, and you know, I actually agree with you. In low light situations like right now, the sun is starting to set, and GoPro color here would probably look fine, but you know, filming in flat on this thing is actually pretty damn good, and sometimes you don't even need adjustment. So this is what I look like filmed in the flat profile. So one of the things that this also shares with the Hero 6 is that it does good slow-mo. There are some issues, but it does 240 frames per second at 720, and then 120 frames per second at 1080 and 2.7K, and 60 frames per second at 4K. The only issue is you're stuck at wide. So if you want to clean up any distortion, you have to do it in the back end when you're editing. But it only records slow-mo in wide. Let's go ahead and check out my golf swing and how bad that is. And while we're at it, here's a couple of crazy looking GoPro views that you just can't get with any other camera. This is the reason why people love GoPros. So a couple of you asked what my favorite video settings are for the Hero 7, and really everything in this thing happens at 2.7K. You know, the camera is 4K and it does 4K at 60p. Now in 2.7K you can go up to 120 frames per second, which for me in slow-mo I think is perfect. And the other thing too is in 2.7K you also have access to all of the different angle of views that GoPro gives you. Now, speaking of angle of views, here's what they look like. Alright, this is 2.7K at super view, normal GoPro wide focal length looking thing. So this is linear and this is wide. And this is kind of zoomed halfway in, I guess. Alright, here you go. This is as tight as they'll get. Still on linear, super wide, wide, linear, which is what you're looking at right now. And then you've got your digital zoom, but it's not really a zoom because you can't zoom in when you're recording video. But what you can do is tighten the focal length a little bit. And it's not really a zoom because you have to stop recording to change the focal length, but then you can tighten in a little bit, and video quality is still pretty good here. Alright, really quick, I'm going to burn through the video settings just to show you guys what I'm shooting at. 2.7K obviously, but 24 frames per second. Now this is the thing, I like 24 for just about everything, but if you're doing slow-mo, obviously you're going to want to change that. And you can go to 120p, which is what I did my golf swings at. But the other thing I found was interesting is if you are shooting in low light scenarios, putting it on 30 or 60 actually gives you a more stable background. And so here's an example of what I'm talking about. I am shooting at 24p, which is not what I recommend. This is what I use outside and in good light. Now when I move around, you'll see there's some stress in the background, and it causes like a little bit of, just a tiny bit of motion blur or some sort of shutter drag or whatever you want to call it. Now at 30p, when I start moving around, it seems to look a lot better, and it doesn't actually have the same issues that it does at 24p. Now at 60, you'll see that it's recording about, you know, a half a stop darker, but at the same time when I'm moving around, the background looks a little bit more natural and doesn't look nearly as weird as it does at 24p. So I leave my point of view on linear for right now. Shutter I leave on auto. Exposure compensation I turn down just half a stop. And what that does is that helps me save the highlights a little bit. So if I need to adjust later, I can. Just makes for a slightly more richer looking picture. And then your auto white balance, this one does a really good job on auto, better than the Hero 4. But if I'm working outside, I'm going through a shady area, then you're better off setting your white balance preset, and that way you don't get this weird color shift as you're walking through shadows and things like that. So the ISO I set at max 800 because 3200 and 1600 are way too noisy on this thing. Sharpness, I leave that on low. And the reason why, again, is so that way I can do some post editing if I need to, and there's just a little bit more information there. And the color already I said is on flat. And then raw audio, of course leave it off, because this is the bug I was telling you about, where it records a WAV file for you that you can't actually open. So that kind of sucks. Those are the video settings that I like. Now they're the same in 1080p and slightly limited in 720. So let's take a look at photo mode. So for photo settings, I leave my field of view at wide, because if you turn it on linear, then you cannot shoot RAW. If you turn on super photo, you cannot shoot RAW. So I do turn Pro Tune on, and this allows me to, you know, adjust all this stuff as needed. So I can change my shutter speed, my exposure compensation, my white balance, my ISO, and then I leave my color profile again on flat, and my sharpness here on medium. That way I've got room to adjust in the back end if I need to. Time-lapse settings. And basically you've got time warp, and time warp allows you to record on either 4K or 1080, and your field of view is only wide, and then you can change your speed from 2x all the way to 30x. Time-lapse video, which is what I shot my storm in, that allows you to again choose 4K or 1080, and then your field of view is just wide again, but your intervals can go from actually half a second all the way to 60 seconds in between. So that's for time-lapse video. Now for time-lapse photo, this is a little different. So here, again, it only records a JPEG. It doesn't actually allow you to shoot RAW in time-lapse photo settings. Now this leaves you with a group of JPEGs. So your interval is whatever you want it to be, basically from 0.5 seconds to 1 second. And then field of view is linear, and then you can either set that to linear or wide, and then again you can set your white balance and your ISO minimum maximum, and your sharpness. I put this on low, and then my color flat again, just so that way I can adjust if I need to later on. Night time lapse is slightly different from that. Your first option is your shutter duration. So that means your shutter is going to stay open for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, or 30 seconds. So you're taking really long exposures. Now your interval is either going to be auto, meaning that if I set it to 20 seconds, it'll take one every 20 seconds, or you can set it to just 30 seconds. Now your other option is going to be your field of view, and you have wide or linear, but if you turn it to linear, then you don't get RAW. So I prefer RAW. I leave RAW on. And then your white balance, 5500K is usually what I set it at night. It just seems to look fine. And then your ISO minimum at 100, ISO max again at 800, so I can avoid noise. And then my sharpness setting set to low. For this setting, I actually leave my color on GoPro because I want that high saturation, high contrast look. It just makes for a more interesting photo. So this is going to leave you with a ton of long shutter speed photos saved as GRVs because I have it set up with RAW on. Or JPEGs if you decide to do the linear route and turn the RAW photo off. So anyway, there you go. That's what I got for you. So I'm David from Lavika Photography. Leave me a comment. Subscribe to my channel for more information like this. Give me a thumbs up, and otherwise we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.